Welcome to Deep Drinks Podcast, where the drinks are deep and the conversations are deeper. Does God heal amputees? That's the question Thomas Westbrook, the guest, and I will be discussing this episode on Deep Drinks Podcast. So welcome everybody. We are continuing Dry January, which is about promoting balance, making sure that we keep alcohol in the fun category and not in the coping category. Or at least not coping for too long anyway. It's always good to make sure we're pumping the brakes on things that could be so delicious. So without further ado, I'll introduce our guest. Thomas Westbrook is the creator of the popular YouTube channel Holy Kool-Aid. This is his second time on Deep Drinks. His channel boasts over 250,000 subscribers and 29 million views. Thomas promotes scientific skepticism and critical thinking and is currently investigating miracles. His next episode will be in the next couple of days. However, his Patreon supporters have had an early glimpse at some of those things. So if you want to see the early glimpse, go to his Patreon. If you want to check out the video when it comes out, it'll be the next couple of days. Welcome, Thomas Westbrook.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be on.
Did you change your background?
Yeah, well, no, I'm actually out here and check out this beautiful sunset at this old church.
It looks like a scene from like one of the original God of War games, like
kind of
like, yeah.
Which I've actually been playing the new God of War, and it not the new one, but the one that they just released on PC through Steam right before Ragnarok.
Oh yeah,
amazing.
Yeah. I want to get back into that. I started playing it, and I don't think I was in the mood for that style of game. But I want to get back into playing it because I used to love the originals, and the more I'm learning about like mythology, I'm like, oh wow, they actually took real world things and put them into the game. Like that's so cool.
And I mean, like it twists a lot of mythology and stuff. Obviously, you have a character that's not really a real character that's now moving from Greek mythology into Norse mythology and like fighting with Norse gods and stuff. So it's like there's a lot of, I mean, all mythology is made up and changes over time. But if you're actually wondering, like, what did Norse pagans believe? There's going to be a stretch, but you're still going to learn about actual gods and goddesses and different, creatures and stuff. So it's fun. And I love that type of thing. Like I loved playing the Assassin's Creed game that took place in Egypt, because like on top of, while there's a lot of historical fiction, there's still a lot of things that it's like that's actually what some of the buildings looked like, and they actually went to a great amount of detail, or do a great amount of research in order to get the details right.
I haven't played that one. Do they have aliens building the pyramids? Because obviously that's how.
No, I was actually surprised, because I got that back when I was doing my video on the pyramids and how the pyramids were built, and that was going to be like, once I'm done with this video, because I've just been taking a deep dive into ancient Egyptian history. Once I'm done with this video, I can reward myself by getting and playing that game. And there was actually part of the like non-gameplay part of the game where you could just do like a tour without any like fighting or any story, but just like walking through the Great Pyramid and seeing the things that like archaeologists actually have to say about it. And it wasn't like ancient alien stuff. It was actual research and actual, hypotheses that have been put forward. And it was pretty spot on.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm going to have to go back and I have some catching up to do with the video games. I think it's been a dry few years for me. In fact, I actually started my own gaming channel. It's got no subscribers. No one cares, but I've been playing through Nintendo 64 games, and that's been really fun.
Cool.
So what are we drinking today, Thomas?
We are drinking, because it is Dry January,
which is a huge difference from when last time you were on the channel and we got shit-faced on Adios Motherfuckers.
AMFs, yeah.
AMFs, yeah. So that was fun.
This time we are doing an Arnold Palmer, which my green screen makes this look almost magical, but it's lemonade and iced tea. So I've got the sweet Red Diamond iced tea, because I'm here in the South, and you got to go sweet tea,
Yeah.
Go big or go home.
I got the Lipton iced tea. I could only get lemon flavored, but I thought lemon is close enough to lemonade, and then lemonade. So that's what I'm mixing together.
There we
It's
go.
actually pretty good. It's
Yeah, so I've
actually
got
pretty good.
a little bit of ice, and just do about a 50-50 split. And unless you're more wanting like lemon taste and less tea, or vice versa.
Well, as you pour that, has anyone else? Thanks everyone for showing up. By the way, has anyone else continuing with dry January with us, or maybe it's just a dry day for you? In which case, great. Maybe you had too much last night, but so, and we'll ask the simple yet powerful and important question to you, Thomas. Does God heal amputees?
I wish he did.
Mm.
And on that same note, a lot of times the amputee is the one that, you know, is kind of first and foremost, like people will use that as an example. What I want to see is, does God separate conjoined twins?
Yeah, interesting. Why do you want to see that more than
to me that would be even more, it would be even more hard for them to fake or to spoof, because in my research I've seen enough faith healers who are not just fooled themselves, but are genuinely going out of their way to con and scam people. And I feel like if someone comes in with potentially hiding some type of a you know, hiding an arm or hiding a limb and then somehow slipping it out, I feel like that would be a little bit easier to fake than if you straight up have, you know, some if you have like a couple, like two boy conjoined twins walk in like with their shirts off and you can see them where they're stuck together and they're sharing an organ, you know, they're sharing a kidney that they need to survive or something, and all of a sudden they just swoop and like split like an amoeba. If God can create the universe just like that by speaking it into existence, that should be absolutely no problem for him. And for these faith healers, that some of them claim that, I think Todd Bentley, what's he at now? Like he claims that there's like 35 people he's raised from the dead, and yet none of them are on camera and none of them have been verified. And it's just every single time he gives a sermon, that number just like keeps going up. And it's, you almost think that this guy should have a responsibility to just hang out at the morgue and just like, nope, not you, not you, not you. The blood of Jesus.
So is Todd, is that the guy who ran that revival a few years ago who has like tattoos all over him and stuff? Is that the same guy?
He does. He's got, now he has this big orange beard. Before he's still bald, but he used to not have as big of a beard. Now he just looks kind of like an old dude. But he got in trouble for some various sex scandals within his ministry, both involving men and women.
And beautiful.
Allegedly accusations, but let's just say that there were enough accusations that at what point do you kind of tend to, you know, it's like, okay, here's some famous person who, you know, someone came with some vague kind of iffy accusation versus, hey, there are 20 different people that are all coming forward with something. At what point do you just, does it stop being allegedly and it's like, yeah, that's enough for me to
yeah, well, at least investigate it or something, like criminally. Yeah, I mean, that's just I remember when that was happening, I was in ministry college, or it was shortly after I was in ministry college. Like it was around that time in my life, and I remember someone in class said God told him to get all these tattoos, and I was like, oh, like I was like, okay, I was like, this is like, not that I like tattoos, but I was just like, it's weird that God would tell you to get the tattoos,
especially given that there's verses in the Bible that seem to indicate that God doesn't like tattoos.
Yeah. I mean, it's strange. So you've been investigating the supernatural. You've been investigating miracles. Your series is the whole reason I reached out to you, because I watched it and I was like, this is so important. And I actually wanted to kind of kick us off into this whole thing by, I guess, showing a clip of Peter Popoff's ministry. Now, you've seen the clip before. A lot of the audience probably has seen the clip before, but for those who haven't seen it, Peter Popoff was a faith healer in the 90s. So this is a VHS tape.
Actually, earlier than the 90s.
Earlier than the 90s,
Yeah.
okay.
And I think I forget when exactly he was exposed, but it was either the 80s or the 70s. But
yeah. And James Randi had a James Randi is a musician skeptic. He passed away a few years ago tragically, but he's a great guy, and he would expose psychics and things like that. And he went to one of these crusades with a radio scanner to see if they could pick up anything in the audience. And this is the clip from the documentary that they aired. Now, I want you to keep in mind too, as we watch this, as I think it goes for like 2 minutes, is Peter Popoff still has a ministry. So he left for a few years. He's back. His flock's back. People still support him.
Not just that, but it's. I don't know how intentional and deliberate this was, whether it's that this specific audience found him or whether it's that he targeted this specific audience. But because his initial church following was, okay, most of these faith healers are in the South, either Oklahoma or Texas, the vast majority of them, some of them in Florida. And because initially his audience was, middle class, upper middle class, suburban white people, and they're the ones that are watching shows like Johnny Carson, which this aired live on and exposed him on, he knew that he couldn't go back to that audience, and he filed for bankruptcy. So now he's targeting specifically the African-American community because they are less likely to have seen that show. And also because socioeconomically, there is a split and a divide in terms of just structurally education levels within the US. And so it's really fucked up because especially given that he's still pulling the same con and still robbing people of their hard-earned money, and a lot of these people are in incredibly desperate situations. So whether it's deliberate racism versus just a crime of opportunity of, hey, here's an audience that hasn't seen me yet, either way, it's like he's gone from targeting people who are already vulnerable because they are suffering from cancer to people who have even less money to seek out medical care and are desperately turning to him.
I did not know that. That's horrible. I don't want to poison the well. Everyone can decide, is this man a saint or a sinner? Let's check out this clip.
I tell you, from now on, you're going to have a soul of victory in your heart. Amen.
To his followers, Popoff seemed to have divine powers.
Is it Gould? Alice Gould?
He knew their names.
Stand up, Alice.
As well as the afflictions they'd come to cure.
God is touching that thyroid condition right now. God is touching your nerves right now. God is touching your eyes. Just lift up your hands, get ready. Here it comes.
He also knew the personal details of their lives.
Hear good news from Charles before everything is over. I'll tell you, he's going to be completely delivered because of your prayers, because of your faith. Here it comes, complete healing in Jesus' mighty name, right now, right now, right now. Amen. It's all right to praise the Lord.
I suspected that Popoff's revelations were other than divine. The radio scanner we brought to the hall picked up a decidedly worldly source.
Hello, Petey. Can you hear me? If you can't, you're in trouble.
Popoff was being prompted by his wife through a wireless earpiece.
John?
Deary Johnson.
She'd gotten her information from prayer cards filled out by the faithful before the show began.
She wants to get rid of the walker.
You want to get rid of this walker, sister? Oh, glory. How long have you been walking on that walker?
About 3 years.
3 years.
She lives at 1627 10th Street.
1627 10th Street?
That's right.
She has arthritis all over.
Burning this arthritis right out of your body. Take a few steps just to make the devil mad. Hallelujah. That's it. Just move around a little bit. There she goes. Just walk with me. Oh, glory to God. She's not going to need that walker anymore. God's just putting new strength, new health, burning that arthritis out of her body. Just keep going. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
I was able to arrange for another broadcast of the Miracle Crusade on The Tonight Show, but this time the wireless prompting was included.
Yeah. So, I don't know about you guys. I feel like he's a piece of shit. And I think that part of the reason why these conversations need to happen is because of people like Peter Popoff still running around, still pulling the same tricks. And you can tell why. It's because when there is no hope in someone who may have terminal cancer or something, like they turn to the supernatural, they turn to spiritual leaders to give them who tell them that there is 100% hope in the name of Jesus or whatever guru they're subscribed to.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that's heartbreaking is that a lot of the people in these situations are they have conditions which are potentially treatable. So there's plenty of cases where you'll see children who they have no say in the matter as to like whether or not they go to a doctor or whether or not they go to a faith healer, and yet their parents will be into a faith healing cult, whether it's like Word of Faith or whether it is Christian Scientists, and they'll opt for faith healing instead, and the kids wind up dying as a result. So in those situations, it's not always taking the kid to a faith healer. Sometimes it's just the parents at home anointing the kid's head with oil, but it's because they watch things like Peter Popoff, and they'll see these big televangelists coming on, saying it's health and wealth. God wants you to be healthy. He wants you to be wealthy. And I'm here to cure you. And miracles are still happening. And the Holy Spirit comes and can heal anyone. And a lot of them are pulling stunts. They're pulling cons and scams on people. And they need to be called out and they need to be exposed. But when someone sees it, it looks so convincing that these videos will get shared all over the internet as proof of miracles and the divine and the supernatural, and people will add that to the back of their head, like as to their data bank of, oh, God must be real because I saw this miracle. And then if that miracle, they see that one, they see another one, they see another one, they might all be complete hoaxes. And yet you're in your mind, you're thinking, oh, there's a lot of data. Well, that one wasn't real, but there's plenty of others that I've seen. Oh, well, that one wasn't real, but there's plenty of others. And the more that I have dug into this and just gone after one faith healer after another, after another, after another, I've seen time and time and time again where, especially with the big ones, like the major televangelists, I'm talking like the top 50, it is very, very, very difficult for me to say that I think that any one of them does not know that they are scamming people or being dishonest, at least in some sense of the word.
It's really tough, isn't it? Because I think I tend to agree with you that when I first started deconstructing my faith, I thought, oh, a lot of people are just don't fully, like they're not cognizant of their deception and what they're teaching. But then I discovered there were a lot of people who were, especially like in the Young Earth Creation movement, in the faith healing movement, and I was actually really disgusted that these people were getting away with it. But there are some churches who fully believe. I believe they fully believe what they teach. 100%.
Yeah, and this is the distinction that I want to make. When I say among the top 50, I do not think that you get to that level of attention, of publicity, of wealth without being really in it deep. Because imagine that you have two people, and one 100% wholeheartedly believes it, thinks that, God is answering prayers, and they're coming along and they're laying hands on people, and that person saying, I feel better, you prayed over me, like, this is fantastic. And in actuality, it's just that they're getting an adrenaline rush in the moment, the pain is being dissipated, there's all these neurochemical processes that are going on in that setting, and that person thinks that, God just healed them. And both the person being prayed for and the faith healer. In that situation, I think that it's genuine, but that's not going to get as much attention as someone like Todd White, who comes along and says, I can straighten your legs out, and one leg is longer than the other, and I'm going to pull this trick, or I'm not pull this trick, but I'm going to pray over your legs, and right there in front of the camera, you see one leg extending. And it's one of the most like discernible signs of someone being a con artist and a scammer is when they do that leg trick. And there's a couple different ways that you can do it, but none of them are, hey, this person's leg is actually growing. They're either taking a slip-on shoe and they're like pulling the shoe off and on a little bit, or they're taking the person's legs and they're kind of like tilting one backwards and forward. Another way is if the person themselves is in on it, then they can kind of shift their hips a little bit, or the faith healer can pick up their legs and hold them off to the side just ever so slightly. And what that does is it kind of makes one kind of go out versus in. When you like hold it straight forward, it might be straight, but then if you like hold it to the side, one is a little bit longer. And so like there's a couple of different ways that they can do that trick, and like 4 different ways that I know of. And that's a go-to trick for, W.V. Grant used it consistently. Todd White uses it all the time. There's a couple of other people, and you start seeing that, oh, hey, this faith healer's using it, this faith healer's using it, this faith healer's using it. And then like, if those ones know that what they're doing is dishonest, because you can't do that without realizing what you're doing, then if they're connected with a bunch of other faith healers, like Benny Hinn, who is actively vetting, he has basically a mob in the audience of catchers, if you will, people, ushers and stuff, who are the ones that will prevent people from coming to the front and select who in the audience gets to come to the front. Reinhard Bonke did this as well, where
I've seen him live.
Really? It'd be like auditioning to get to go to the front. And if you said, oh, I'm healed of this great thing and I can do this thing, they'd be like, okay, you can get up on stage. But if you're coming forward to be prayed for and you have cerebral palsy, or you're, completely paralyzed, good luck getting forward to the front. And, they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. And they hear, the stories of, people, sometimes they get sued, and sometimes they have, people come forward and expose them. And it doesn't matter. They're making millions and millions upon millions of dollars. And then they're able to reinvest that in launching TV shows and like showing it, oh man, this is all, this person's coming forward and claiming that they're being healed. And like in the case of Benny Hinn, there's probably been like 10 different TV stations at least that have done exposés on him, that have followed up with people that came on stage, and like every single one, time and time again, it's like, oh, this person wasn't actually healed. This person thought they were healed in the moment. Turns out that they weren't. This person, came forward and they felt like they were better, and then like a few months later they died of cancer. And I have, in one of my videos already, I have a compilation of just Benny Hinn, and it's just one person after another that is like, this person died 2 months later, this person started to improve and then died this many months later, and this person died. And it's just like this countless list of people who have died because of faith healing, and the faith healers know about it. They know about it, and in some situations they're actively discouraging people from going and getting medical care, and they're telling them to opt for faith healing instead. But then if they come on a TV program, they'll deny it. They'll say, because when they're giving their sermon, they might say something like, Dr. Jesus will heal you in ways that the doctors never can. And when you have faith,
Jesus
you don't
is my vaccine and all that.
Yeah, and all this stuff. But then if they come on a show, they're very cautious with what they say. So they'll say, I never told any specific person to not go see a doctor. Like, absolutely, by all means, go and get tested. In fact, that'll verify and show that it's a real miracle. And they'll say that they have all these documents and all these records proving it, and then they don't. And when they do provide them, there's either a bunch of information detracted and you still can't track down the people, or you follow up and you actually find the doctors, you find the people, and you realize that it wasn't a miracle. It was either a misdiagnosis to begin with, or the person still has the condition, or the person was getting treatment from their doctor and recovered at the normal rate that they would have. And so you start seeing all of that, and you start seeing how much greed and how much money is tied to it. And then you start finding other things within this network where, I'll give you an example. There's an organization, I believe it's called St. Matthew's Church, but it's changed names like 3 or 4 times. The Trinity Foundation has done exposés on them and like done press releases on them. But basically, and if you're not familiar, the Trinity Foundation is a watchdog organization. It's a Christian organization that's a watchdog organization for these faith healers and for con artists and scams.
I back that.
And 100%, they do phenomenal work. But this group called St. Matthew's is actually a direct mail marketing firm that you may have seen some of their stuff that they've done for like Robert Tilton and others, where they will send out like, oh, hey, here's this little thing, this seed of faith or whatever, and you have to plant this in the ground and then send me back, here, I've placed my hand on this piece of paper, now you place yours on it and trace around it, and send back $5 as a showing your faith and how much you believe, and God is going to bless you with tremendous prosperity within 90 days as long as you follow the words of the prophet of God. And they'll do this like 10, 20, 30 times, just back and forth, because when people come and show up at their revival healing crusades, they collect their information of everyone that buys tickets. They collect their address, they collect, and they get on these mailing lists. And so these companies have literally gone through and psychologically figured out the best ways to market to people who are, gullible, vulnerable, desperate, in need of some kind of wealth breakthrough. And they'll target them with these things, and then they'll get responses, and then they just they put them in this pipeline of, all right, now you're in the funnel, and we are gonna keep pumping out all of this mail stuff to you. And when the person sends it back, they found like entire piles of this stuff just in the dumpster that like no one ever read, no one ever looked at. And the pastor, it sounds like it's this very personal communication where the pastor's like, dear Irma, I was so grieved to hear of your cancer, the cancer that your husband is struggling with, but we're here to fight it together. And it has the illusion of being personal, but in actuality, they're blasting this out, these marketing mailings out at scale. And when this first really took off was like back in, I want to say like the 60s. I believe it was like 1960s or 70s. And it was, there were a couple of faith healers, including Oral Roberts, T.L. Osborne, eventually Robert Tilton, possibly F.F. Bosworth. Like there's a couple of like really big name ones that basically when they all use the same guy. They all use the same service and they all use the same company because it's a way that it's all about the money. It's not about caring for people and healing people. It's about how much can we rake in? How much can we get out of these people? And so that tells me that like these people they know exactly what they're doing, and it's all interconnected. So you have that. And so you start seeing these connections. You start seeing kind of this web, and you start seeing like who's who, and then who was like an underling or a protege of someone else. And so like Oral Roberts will come along and he'll have tremendous influence and connections with someone like Catherine Coleman, who then it directly influences Benny Hinn. And they're all going on each other's TV stations. They're all promoting each other. They're all, doing shout outs for each other. And it's every single one of them is pulling the same gimmicks and using the same money-making strategies. And they're all, health and wealth, name it and claim it, prosperity doctrine preachers, and they're faith healers too. And so you start seeing the overlap there. Then you get to churches like Bethel, where there's actually training students in the divine arts. It's basically like the Hogwarts of Christianity. But
that is a perfect. It is the Hogwarts of Christianity. I actually wanted to talk about Bethel, but finish what you're going to say because.
So like Bethel, I was watching an interview with one of the elders from Bethel who had left the church, and he was basically saying how he did not see a single miracle while he was there. That
really,
he's like, every single thing that I saw was very easily explainable. There were a few cases where people were getting medicine, like medical treatment, in addition to being prayed over, but like he never saw an actual like organic healing. It was always things like, oh, I had a congested nose or a headache or something, and it's like the pain went away, the pain was eased, or something psychosomatic occurred. There, not one single thing where it's like this person, has a hand that's completely crippled and crumpled up, and they pray over him and boom, it's like back to normal and it's medically verified before and after. Like never saw anything like that. But what he did see was there was like they have the glitter that falls from the ceiling, and they're like, oh, it's the holy, we're praying and Jesus is like raining glitter down on us.
Gold
And
dust, whatever.
he found that like there was like another church that was like associated with Bethel where he literally walked in on someone dumping glitter in the ventilation system.
Oh, really? That's so. I have friends who traveled from Australia to America to do Bethel training, and they, at the end they get anointed.
My sister did.
Oh, really? They get anointed with a sword. Like they get down on one knee and they get anointed with a sword. Feels a little Freemasony, but I you see, this is where I don't know if we might differ in opinions here, but well, obviously there is the Peter Popoffs of the world who are absolute frauds. We know they're frauds. We know they're in it for the money. They don't give a shit about people. The world would be a better place if they didn't exist. Not advocating for violence, but then there are people who I think Bethel. I think the leaders of Bethel and the community of Bethel believe in miracles. I think they believe that these things can happen. And the thing that really got me, and I was unsure if I was going to mention this, but when I was interviewing Feral Pastor's wife a few weeks ago now, they brought up a story that just had me like shaken up. And let me just share it. Let me just stop sharing. Sorry, everyone. I'm a little bit of a boomer. And this. Whoop. So there was a little. So I looked into it last night, and my wife was expecting yesterday. So our due date was yesterday, and we're still yet to have the baby.
Congratulations,
no baby
by the way.
Thank you. It's very exciting. This broke my heart, and I don't know if it's just because it's so close to home, but my thoughts and condolences go out to the family and everyone affected. But Feral Pastor's wife told me about this. There was a child who died in the church, and the child was 2 years old, and they prayed over the child's body for 4 days, believing for a resurrection.
Is Olive something?
Yeah, this is footage from the mother. Day 4 is a really good day for a resurrection. Come alive, Olive. And it's the whole church believing and praying. Bill Johnson, the pastor, produced a video talking about how they were believing on behalf of this child.
Why is he wearing glasses?
Hey, now.
Genuinely.
Yeah.
If God heals eyesight, why are all these faith healers wearing glasses?
That's a good question. It's a good question. I don't know.
That's and I see that, and I see also like faith healer after faith healer who, like Kenneth Copeland, he will walk through the audience and claim that he's healing all these people. Now, Kenneth Copeland is worth like $100 million, his ministry.
My mother back in the 90s gave him $500 when that wasn't a lot of, that was a lot of money for us at the time.
And
so
Kenneth Copeland has he'll have various like revival healing crusades and stuff, and people will come for these conferences and stuff, and they'll have healings, and I don't know that Kenneth Copeland necessarily does it himself as much anymore, but he has a protege of his church named Billy Burke, and it's just disgusting the stuff that this guy does, and it's so transparently like obvious to me, having watched just hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of this stuff. You start to spot this person knows what they're doing. So like I see that where like in the case of I forget where I was going with this, but you were saying the eyeglasses. Kenneth Copeland literally has a pacemaker, and he went to the hospital for heart problems. Why are these guys going to the hospital? Jack Coe claimed that he cured people all the time, multiple people, of polio. Guess what he died of when he was 38? It's my next video is on this guy. Died of polio. Guess what he did before he died? Because
I shouldn't laugh.
He was
I shouldn't laugh at someone dying of polio.
He got sick on like November 28th, 1956. Got sick, was in really critical condition, went to the hospital, and he was in the hospital and like in critical condition. He would wake up and then he'd fall back asleep, and like people were praying for him. They had entire like 24-hour prayer chains where like multiple faith healers and people in all these churches, they're all praying for him, for him to get better. And he was one of the biggest proponents against people going and getting medical treatment, but opting for faith healing instead. Also got exposed multiple times. I have a whole video on it coming out hopefully tomorrow. And this guy, he, instead of seeking out faith healing himself, goes to the hospital first. And then for like 2 weeks, people are just nonstop praying for him. And then he dies of polio. And he's not the only one that's had that type of a situation. And then you start looking into these guys' lives.
It's because he went to the hospital. That was stepping outside of faith. He should have just remained in the faith and he would have been okay. It was not believing God to go to the hospital.
Yeah. But you start looking into these guys, and there's a certain amount of faux humility that they put forward. And when I say that I'm very skeptical with Bethel, it's that I see the ties and the connections that they have with other people within the church. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing the same thing, but I know that Todd White has really strong ties to Bethel, and I know that he's done and given like sermons and stuff there, and people are like, oh look, Todd White is going to come up and heal us and stuff. And he literally goes and does the leg trick. That's his signature move on the street. And he
the dreadlock guy.
Yeah, there's a video where this guy says that like he went to he was on the beach in Hawaii because Todd White has like a Hawaii beach house and everything, because he's, of course all of them have filthy stupid amounts of money. And Todd White this guy goes to Hawaii, and he just happens to see Todd White on the beach, goes up to him, and Todd White's like, yeah, is there anything that you need healing over or whatever? And he'd just been doing the leg trick on the beach, but Todd knows that like, hey, if this is just a placebo, if someone has a stomach ache and I pray over it and it feels better, it's like, oh wow, God heals. Or if like their leg hurts or their knee hurts and I pray over it, or their shoulder hurts and I pray over it, then it's like, oh man, look, God has healed you. But if it's something that's obvious, some like organic thing or some, either deformity or some broken bone that hasn't been reset or complete total blindness, then he's not going to be able to do anything about that. And so he's talking to this guy, and this guy's like, actually, I do have an injury. When I was younger, I was playing sports and I broke my finger, and his finger is still kind of like crooked like that. And Todd White's like, huh, interesting. And then just completely turned and ignored him and just like looked away, and like just because he knew that there's nothing he could do.
Yeah.
And so it's stories like that, as well as seeing the types of things that they do, seeing the connections that they have, and seeing the ways that they raise money and the fundraising tactics and scams that they pull on people. That I see that, and then I see them weeding out people in the audience and having basically auditions for who gets to come on stage. And that really, really raises red flags for me. One of the other things that Todd White does is he uses the same tricks that psychics will use, where they will shotgun things out into the audience hoping for a hit, because they know that statistically it's likely. So they'll play up the music, they'll get it super amped and super emotional, and everyone's like excited. And they're like, now, I believe that, people here, God is telling me that people are going to be healed with shoulder injuries, and people are going to be healed of, internal cancers, and people are going to be healed of arthritis. And the stuff that they list off, it is always, always, always the same things. It's diabetes, it's arthritis, it's joint pain, like knees, hips, back. A lot of times it's back pain, shoulder pain, they'll do things like partial deafness, because it's really hard to kind of, unless you actually go in for a hearing test, to be able to tell exactly,
like someone nudges you and you put your hand up like, yes, I'm deaf.
Or people being raised out of wheelchairs. It's stuff like that. And the thing is, a lot of times people who are in wheelchairs can walk, they just shouldn't walk, because they have maybe like they've broken a bone, and so like they're healing, and you need to isolate, like maybe use crutches for a while. And you can put the crutches aside and hobble around on your foot. It's just, there's a reason why the doctor has you off of that foot for a while, because it needs to heal and not be damaged, or else it can like recur, right? And so they'll have people come in, and like some of them will even bring wheelchairs to the situation, where like James Randi spotted W.V. Grant having, outside of his service, an entire truck pull up and start unloading wheelchairs. And when people would come in who were like elderly, or maybe who had a cane or something, he would be like, here, this will be more comfortable for you while you wait. Why don't you sit in this wheelchair?
Yeah,
and then
I've heard that.
They'd roll them to the front, and he'd be like, in the name of Jesus, you're going to be healed, and your hips are going to be better. Rise out of that wheelchair. And it looks like this phenomenal, impressive stunt that they just pulled. But then you stop and you realize, like, oh, that person isn't doing anything that they couldn't already do. Or maybe they have a rush of adrenaline, and so they're able to do something that's, they could do, but like they could do with a lot of pain, and now they're able to do it without.
I had and the problem is people like kids, they see something on TV and then they go replicate it. It's like people see these things and they go replicate it. I think I told you last time you were on, or I mentioned it before on the podcast, but we had someone who broke their neck in our church in a prayer meeting. They cut off the cast of his neck and they dug their knuckles into the broken bone to prove that it was healed. Look, doesn't hurt. And he was healed for 2 days until he got rushed back to hospital when his neck screwed up again. Now, and we're all trying to work out what was the sin that he had in his life that made that happen. When in reality he was probably in a brace because he couldn't move it, because it was likely going to get damaged again if he did move it. The other thing too is like miracles. I just lost my train of thought, but there's a difference. Sorry, go.
While you're saying that, there's in terms of the neck brace, I've seen people like Benny Hinn do that as well, where they'll take off the neck brace of someone, and they'll vigorously shake their neck around to show and to prove that they're healed. And the person in the moment, they're getting such a shock and such a jolt, and it's really harmful. It's really dangerous too, depending on like the severity of the break.
Well, even if even if you don't have to shake someone's neck around is like, even when I was doing karate back when I was a little kid, that they would teach you about, like, your neck can be really, you shouldn't shake around someone's neck. It can be really bad for you. So what you're saying there about people calling out things, I've mentioned this before, but my wife and I went through IVF with our baby, and for a long time we went through 5 years of fertility treatment, and because Amy has endometriosis. Now, a friend of ours went to who's like a fundamentalist Christian, went to a church, and the church said had a prophet coming the following week, and someone came up on stage and said, this prophet is coming, and God just told me that there is someone here who has a relative who has endometriosis who needs to be healed, and God wants to heal them next week if they come along to this service. So this was something like a year ago, a year or two ago, like a little while ago.
Yeah.
And Amy and I were in the depths of our heartbreak, getting let down after let down after let down with our fertility treatment. And it was actually really hard for us to hear that, because not that we believed anymore, but it hit too close to home. And it even us, like someone who, like, we're both thought through our positions and we don't believe in God, and even for us, that made us feel like, this, what if it is real? Like, what if it is real and this can help us? And that was that was fertility treatment. That wasn't like terminal cancer. That wasn't like, and I remember talking to my roommate about it, and I said, would you go to this thing? And and she said no. And I said, why? And she goes, because I live in reality. And I was like, okay. And like, that was a pretty funny joke or whatever. But the thing that really got me to reconsider the idea that this could even be a thing, and this is the next thing I kind of want to talk about, is the ethics of faith healing. And in that circumstance, I remember thinking to myself, if God could heal Amy of her fertility stuff, I would say don't. I would say please don't heal Amy. Like, go stop that child from being raped. Go stop that. Go give food to that starving child. Use your powers for something more important. We can go through. We're in a first world country. We have money. We can go. We can. We're not rich or anything, but we can go through the medical means to fix Amy's issues. Go save someone who's actually needs saving. And I remember it was when I realized how disgusting this, if God was coming to intervene, saying, I'm going to heal this person if they come to this church, when I realized how disgusting that was, when there are people being raped, murdered, abused, starving, cancer in the world, I realized that I didn't agree with it, even on an ethical level. On an ethical level, I was like, no.
There's also a tremendous amount of letdown that you feel when you're not healed. When you go and everyone else seems to be healed around you, and then you're not. And there's a tendency to blame yourself, because what the faith healers will tell you is that, oh, if you weren't healed, it's because you don't have enough faith, or because there's some sin in your life. There's something holding you back, and you need to confess it, or you need to come forward and believe. And some of these people come time and time and time again. Some of them have been coming for 10 years to faith healing crusades, just desperately hoping that night is going to be their night. And they're convinced, so wholeheartedly convinced. And they will do all kinds of acts in order to show and demonstrate. Some of them will throw away their medication, or throw away their crutches ahead of time, throw away their glasses, believing that they're going to receive a miracle. And then they wind up either hurting themselves because they are now doing without the medical treatment that they desperately needed, or they, at the very least, wind up having to spend more money to go and get new glasses. Some of them, and one story I heard of a guy, he threw away his glasses, desperately needed them because he was legally blind without it, and then he's like, in faith I'm gonna drive, and he drove and wrecked into another car. So it's not just affecting you and yourself, they're believing it to such an extent that it's harming others around them. And this is happening at scale, where these faith healers are putting out these messages, and millions of people are seeing it on TV, and thousands, tens of thousands are showing up to the auditoriums and getting these messages. So it's the level of harm that it does goes far beyond just robbing people's money. And on top of that, you have situations where people, they're not only blaming themselves, but now, because they have something that's visible that they're not healed of, there's a certain amount of shame that comes along with that, and a certain amount of guilt, where everyone can see that they're not healed, and everyone is looking at them and blaming them. There must be something wrong with you. And so they'll go home, and just you can imagine that the level of depression that can lead to. And one girl, I think it was Grace Spurlot or something, who there was a CBC Canada documentary on Benny Hinn, and they featured her, and she was like in a wheelchair because her spine basically had severe curvature of the spine, and she's like
Mhm.
paralyzed in a wheelchair, and she can kind of move her hands a little bit, but like she's not able to get up and walk or move out of that wheelchair. And she got turned away at a Benny Hinn crusade, and they wouldn't even let her come to the front. And she's praying and desperately hoping for a miracle and stuff, and like for years she's thinking that like God is going to heal her and wondering why he's not. And eventually she realizes that like a lot of these guys are these faith healers, like it's a scam and it's a con. And yet she still has people regularly come up to her and ask her. Now she's learned to kind of embrace and accept her condition. And she's like, I'm going to live to the best of my ability. I'm going to live my best life and do the things that I can with what I have.
Mhm.
And her story is incredibly inspiring. Like if you go and just like look her up on social media, like she has done things you would be blown away to see that she's been able to pull off in her condition. What do you call it? Tandem skiing, where she'll be like in a sled in front of someone and they're skiing behind her, and like
That's so cool.
go up in a helicopter to the top of a mountain and ski down.
That's
It's
so
incredibly
cool.
inspiring. It's really cool. But she still will have people come up to her and be like, can I pray over you? And she's just like, please don't. Like, I've gotten this so many times, and it's just, I just want to be seen as a human and not as your potential miracle.
So it's so true. So I know that there might be people, they've probably left by now because we've just done a lot of shitting on people, on faith healers, which fair enough, great. But there are probably people who maybe started this episode thinking, well, we know that there are scammers out there. We know that there are faith healers that are con men, but I experienced a real miracle, or my auntie experienced a real miracle, and we even have some in the chat. So Captain Dadpool said, let me just find it. I am reading everyone's comments, by the way. I had a professor in college say that he prayed away over someone with a tumor and the tumor fell off. I wonder if that person is just, or if you're remembering it right, or because I remember there was a story of Smith Wigglesworth doing that, which most of them, by the way, they're completely unverified and I can go into Smith Wigglesworth, but I won't. But what do you say to someone who's like, no, I prayed for something and it happened? Like, you can't deny my experience. What do you say to someone like that?
I mean, in situations like that, it's difficult to approach a specific person who wholeheartedly believes it, but more often than not, what I encounter is people who say that they had a miracle, but kind of deep down inside, they know that there's a plausible explanation for it. And I have seen time and time again where there was an initial misdiagnosis, where there was, something having to do with like placebo effect. Maybe the tumor was benign and not malignant. Maybe there was something that they thought was a tumor that wasn't. Maybe they didn't actually go to the doctor, but they just had a lump and they assumed it was a tumor. But without a medical diagnosis, then like, how do you know? I've seen situations where they're prayed over in addition to getting medical treatment. So they're going in for chemo and they're going in, or for radiation or something. And they also then happen to go to a faith healer, but then they attribute their healing to the faith healer rather than to what actually healed them. And then there's also cases of spontaneous remission where, whether or not you're prayed over, there's a certain percentage of cancers that your body will naturally fight and they will go away on their own. It's not a very high number, but it's a significant enough number that if you realize that, I forget the percentage of the population in the US that's, I think it's like 70% that's religious. And if most of them are Christian, then a lot of those people, when they get cancer, that's a significant, countless numbers of millions of people who are all turning to prayer. And if they're all turning to prayer, and even if like 0.5% of them have spontaneous rates of remission, then every single one of those stories is going to attribute their healing to the prayer that took place. But
just looking it up on Wikipedia, 1 in 100,000 cancers are estimated to fall under spontaneous regression.
Yeah. And if you look up statistically, because this is something that there are studies that have been performed both on prayer itself as well as on faith healing. If you look at the rates of quote unquote miracles that have taken place at Lourdes, which is like a pilgrimage site where people go because they think it's a holy place where they're going to be healed. And people will go in huge numbers, every single year. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people will go hoping for a miracle at this spring or whatever it is. And so they go to Lourdes, and it's spelled like Lourdes. And if you look at the number of people who have gone hoping for miracles and the number of people that actually have quote unquote miracles, it's this astronomically tiny number that is exactly about what you would expect or less than what you would expect from spontaneous remission rate.
That was in a Richard Dawkins documentary, I'm pretty sure.
He touches on that, and there's a couple of other places that mention that. And it's like, okay, so you look at that, and then you look at prayer studies that are done in hospitals for recovery from like heart conditions. So there was one study that was funded by the Templeton Foundation, which is actually a religious organization that funds different studies, but they tend to fund actual rigorous research rather, but a lot of times having to do with religion or having to do with faith and stuff. And with this study, they looked at cases in a bunch of different hospitals where some people received prayer and knew that they were being prayed for. Some people received prayer, didn't know that they were being prayed for. And some people didn't receive prayer at all. So they have like control groups to kind of compare to.
Yeah.
And the people who received prayer and knew that they were being prayed for actually fared the worst in terms of recovery, which is completely the opposite of what you would think. And it's like, okay, maybe, I don't know why that would be. Like, maybe they felt pressured and like the stress.
Yeah, that's the hypothesis, that they felt like, I better be good because God's like, God, and it stressed them out. Yeah.
And like, there's some like, small studies, here and there that might show like a little bit of a positive correlation with prayer. Some of them show a negative correlation with prayer, but it's like, you look at it overall and it's like, there's absolutely nothing here when you have a good study and you only look at like the studies that are done properly, where like the sample size is significant enough, where they are actually double blinding it, where they are actually like, where the methodology of the study is proper. And there's nothing there that you would that you wouldn't expect in a natural scenario.
The heart study that you just mentioned, that was by the Templeton Foundation, wasn't it? Are they?
It was sponsored by the Templeton Foundation, I believe.
Right, which is a Christian organization, or is it a Christian or a theist organization?
I believe that I believe John Templeton was religious, and when he established his foundation, he wanted to invest in like. Don't quote me on this. I know that. You. I know that he had a religious agenda, but I don't know the full history behind it.
Yeah. Okay. Courageous said, I knew someone who said in Africa they prayed for a man 10 days straight and watched his foot grow back, but then followed up with they didn't have any proof. And that's, I've heard that story. I've heard stories similar to that. I've heard someone say that they saw someone raised from the dead, or they heard of someone raised from the dead, and they trust the person that told them. And these were like home church peeps. These weren't big church peeps. I've also heard the story, and this is a bizarre story. It was in Madagascar, and a friend of mine was a missionary there. He nearly died of malaria twice, and he was like really living he was really doing the missionary lifestyle. And there was a story, apparently it was on the news, I don't know why we can't find any footage of it, where this man was sleeping with a witch doctor and then decided to go back to his wife. The witch doctor got angry, cursed him. His dick turned into a snake, or some form of snake with teeth, and would bite into his leg.
I would get that checked out.
so they strapped it to his leg, so because it kept moving around in his pants and biting his leg, and then they they went to a prayer healing, whatever. They prayed for it, and it went back to a normal dick, right? But then the dick wouldn't work anymore. Okay, so then like he couldn't get an erection anymore. So then he went to another faith healer to get his ability to get erections again back. And I remember telling someone about this when I was a Christian, and they weren't a Christian. They just said, "I don't believe that," and I was just like, "What do you mean?" My friend saw it, and I remember just being so convinced of this like dick demon thing. But I would love, look, hey, if there was evidence of that, like let's look into it. That's amazing. Like
Yeah.
you'd think with all these things happening with smartphones around, you'd see this stuff.
There's a couple of things that a lot of times you'll see these faith healers on shows like, the Trinity broadcast and stuff, where they'll be talking about like, oh man, there's today you see so many, incredible resurrections going on in Africa and all this stuff, because they actually, the faith there is vibrant, and they believe it, and it's real, and it's raw, and you can't deny all these miracles in Africa. In the US, we just don't have the same level of faith, and that's why you don't see it here.
Yeah.
And that's really convenient, because in Africa, one, there's less likelihood of the people having the medical access in order to verify before and after with the condition, especially in villages where there's tremendous poverty. Africa's that's such a broad, like I apologize for painting in such broad brushes, because
in the town of Africa,
because obviously there's incredibly wealthy individuals in Africa. There's incredibly wealthy cities that are not.
It's not all like slums.
But when you have these faith healers that are going to this village that doesn't have healthcare access, and we saw this great wonderful miracle, and it's like, okay, what's the proof? Who looked into it? Was there an actual unbiased journalist who went and reported? The other thing is too, that a lot of these countries, you look at the case of what's his name, is it Mubarak something, that he was a skeptic in Nigeria that got arrested, and because he was basically questioning the faith. And if you have countries that have blasphemy laws, or that have these inherent protections built in to protect these faith healers, and they're incredibly powerful, like some of the wealthiest faith healers in the world live in different parts of Africa, South Africa, Nigeria, etc., and they'll fly these private jets. They'll fly freaking private jets, and they, they're praying over people, and they have these huge broadcasts and stuff, and some of them have connections with the local police department, the local government, the local, and because everyone is religious, or at least there's like a 95% or 98% religiosity rate, then it's seen as this horrible stigma and taboo to criticize them. And so the press is hesitant or scared to speak out. There was one journalist who spoke out about Al-Flukau and literally received threats. Him and his family received threats for speaking out against this dude.
You would expect these people to want to get like things verified, right? Something I want to quickly mention is I put out a call to Michael Jones, which, to be fair, I don't think Michael Jones actually believes miracles happen today. He said that outright, so I don't know why I tweeted to him, but maybe you could tweet that to his followers. Capturing Christianity, Cameron, a bunch of apologists, and I said, hey, I want to hear about a miracle story that happens today. I sent this out to local churches. I sent it to my Facebook followers twice. I sent it out to Twitter like 3 times. Nothing. I made this little form, Anonymous Miracles. What's your testimony? And would you like to be discussed further? I can't get any information from this. There's one response. It's from me. It says, I went to school because I was testing it. So now, given, of course, people aren't going to want to go onto my channel because I'm quite critical of religion and tell us the miracle stories. However, surely there's something. There's someone that can verify something, so I can, because I want to look into these things unbiasedly. I want to look into these things and go, okay, like what could be the reason for this? Is it possible that God's healing you or something?
Yeah, and I've seen a couple of things that to me really taint the and we can laugh about the fact I said taint later. But it really taints the well when it comes to eyewitness testimony and people's firsthand accounts or secondhand accounts. One is there is a tremendous incentive to exaggerate or lie because you feel like this person's soul is on the line. And by telling them about this miracle story, you are potentially convincing and winning this person over. And so if let's say that you see someone who's prayed over and, they say, oh yeah, I feel better. My pain is gone. Then all of a sudden that person was cured of cancer. Or if you see something, or maybe you never followed up with it, you never verified it, but you're like, oh yeah, loads of people followed up and verified it because you're already convinced that it's true. And you don't think that you're necessarily lying because you already believe in miracles. You already are set in this mindset. And so you saw the person pray over them in the moment. You didn't see them go to the doctor. You didn't see the results afterwards. And there's a tremendous disincentivizing factor for the person who goes to the doctor afterwards, after they get their results back from the doctor, to go back to the church and tell anyone that it wasn't a real miracle, because that might harm other people's faith. And that's seen as a bad thing and is seen as negative because it might destroy the faith healer's reputation. And you don't want that to happen because you think that they're genuine and they're sincere, and maybe they are, but maybe they're sincere, but like you think that by showing that your thing wasn't a real miracle, then it's like, but all the other miracles were. So is that going to make people look differently at me because I didn't get healed, because my miracle wasn't lasting? People are going to start thinking that I have some sin in my life, or that I didn't have enough faith, and that there's something wrong with me. And so, so you don't have people coming forward afterwards being like, hey, my miracle wasn't real. But I'll tell you, like right now, as someone who has experienced quote unquote faith healing and had faith healers come and like, I had this guy have a bunch of people surround me, and they all laid hands on me and prayed over my shoulder. And they're like, oh, your shoulder's going to be healed. And in the moment, it was like, oh my God, it feels better. It feels good. Like the pain is gone. And then like a few minutes later, it's like, it's back. This is weird. Why is, and it was exactly in keeping with the effects that you would expect if you have like, adrenaline and stuff. Plus you have, when people are touching you, they're laying hands on you, you have oxytocin, which has a calming effect. It's like the love chemical when you have like skin on skin contact, or you just hug someone or something. You have,
we're learning all about that now, pre-birthing courses.
Yeah. So you've got, oxytocin, you have norepinephrine or adrenaline, which is like fight or flight, because you're like, oh, I have to move to the front. I like, all these eyes are on me. I'm like, it's kind of scared and, heightened hair standing up on the back of my neck. And oftentimes they'll describe their experience as I felt like a warmth washed over me. I felt like I had, and it's this hit of dopamine where all of a sudden there's kind of this relief of, oh, the person's laying hands on me. And there's this rush of adrenaline. There's this rush of dopamine. There's this rush of cortisol, the stress hormone. There's this rush of oxytocin, and this entire chemical cocktail is going on in addition to other things that are firing in your brain. And you're set up and primed to believe, because you're seeing all of these other people in the front row that are all falling over when they have their hands, hands laid on them. And so you're already, in a way, kind of hypnotized into it. It's almost this, like, you're already kind of believe it. But then if you weren't suggestible enough before, the people who are in the front row, because they really buy into it, and you're seeing the effect that it has on them. And then you have this flood of cocktails, and you're surrounded by people, and you're up at the front, and you're crying, and you're in an emotional state because the music is going. And it's just like this whole situation that's been set up for you to have this experience. And so you're like, I had a miracle. But then 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later, it goes away. But you're like, wait, did it really go away? Am I just like, do I need to pray harder?
I don't know if it would be possible for God or God's presence to be in a room and not everyone experience it. I don't know why some people can be in the back of the room and be just arms crossed. I don't know if you can just not open your heart and then you just can cut off God. Like that seems weird to me. Also, another thing, take everything you just said, right? But imagine yourself growing up in a poor village in Africa, and then a big white man with all his lights and crazy stage and all this stuff comes and puts on this big show and tells you about this miracle, right? Imagine putting yourself coming to the front in that, talking about someone of a different culture talking about these things. It just it adds to people's like to the experience for people. I remember being in Vanuatu as a teenager, and me and two of the youth went away, and we went to this poor village that we just got invited into by the kids. We're giving out red frogs or whatever, and there was a lady with her legs were twisted out and they were crippled, and we tried to pray for her. Her hut was about the size of, like, smaller than this office, and it was made of tin and cardboard. And we're praying for her, trying to get her legs to stop being twisted. She couldn't walk. She was sitting in mud. And we're praying for her, and it didn't work. And I remember one of the youth we're with said, God told me why it didn't work. And I said, why? And he said, because we were white. And she would have thought that that it was the white man that healed her when God wanted her to know that God can heal her. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. So yeah, I just remembered that. Just remember that then.
There's I have a similar story, but it was so I went to this, it was kind of this retreat in college. And we're like a typical college retreat, a lot of prayer, worship, reading the Bible, listening to messages and stuff on the Bible. Yeah. And there was one guy there who everyone thought he was a prophet. He was kind of he was the group prophet, like of our core friend group. Yeah. And it was a pretty charismatic group that I was in to begin with. Like, pretty much everyone believed in miracles and faith healing and prophecy and all of that. And that everyone could have access to that stuff. But this guy in particular, everyone's like, oh yeah, he's the real deal. And I thought he was too. But then in the moment, we're all kind of like just hanging out and like after the worship, and we're all kind of dancing around and stuff. And I had just started taking gymnastics classes in college.
Yeah.
And I did a backflip, but I undercut my backflip and I landed on concrete just a little bit short. And my front toe completely just went pop, like up and out of place.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there just like, oh, this is like intense pain. Like I would rather break, there's a lot of bones I would rather break besides like fingers and toes, because you have a lot of like nerve endings. And this prophet guy comes up and I was like, can you pray over it? And he takes one look at it and he's like, God is telling me that he wants to teach you a lesson through this.
That's so you're like, oh, that's so good.
And then like all these other people gather around and they start praying over me and nothing happens. And then they go and they get the nurse, and the nurse comes and just goes pop and like pops it back into place and splints it up. And I was just like, what the hell? What do you mean? Like, he wants to teach me a lesson? He can teach me a lesson with a straight toe.
Oh, wow.
Without me having to like, go see a doctor and get x-rays and stuff.
There was this guy, runs with this guy we used to have at church. He used to always run around rebuking people for the most mediocre things. So like, you'd say like, oh, damn it. And he'd be like, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And you're like, why? Because I said damn. And he said, yeah. And you're like, oh, it's such a cheap way to feel superior over someone. Like, God wants to teach you a lesson. That's so great.
There was another time when I was up in Montana visiting my aunt, and there was this kid who, he was maybe like 12 years old when this happened, but he was riding his bike. I'm gonna try, like, he rode his bike into a train.
What?
Which, I'm trying not to laugh, but at the same time, like, how do you not see a train? Like, I guess when you live by the tracks, it's just like you get so used to it.
The train moving?
Yeah, the train was moving, and he rode his bike, and it just boom, and he went flying up in the air, came crashing down, and he landed on his head.
Oh.
And his skull got pushed in, like part of his skull got like indented.
Oh,
He suffered severe brain trauma from it, severe head injury. And so, and I kid you not, this like, I could probably find pictures somewhere of this kid, but basically he had this indentation in his head, completely like paralyzed in a wheelchair. He survived the incident, but he lived, I don't even know if he made it into his 20s. Like he lived several years after that, but like he was, confined to a wheelchair. And it was tragic because like his
less funny now.
Loved him and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you say that's funny now?
I said less funny now.
Oh, less funny now.
Yeah.
I thought you were throwing some sarcasm in. Yeah. No, it's a horrible story, but I remember going over to his house and like his mom was there and my aunt was a pastor and she's retired now, but like several other people, and we're, just seeing them and stuff. And I was like, can I pray over him like for a miracle? And his mom, there was like part of her that I could see just kind of like sunk inside where she's like, you can try, as if like I haven't been pouring my heart out to God for the last like however many months. And then this audacious kid comes in and thinks he's just going to like heal my son, have his head heal better. And I genuinely thought it would. Like I genuinely had like the faith of a child because I was not that old myself at the time. And so I like, was praying and praying and praying and like both out loud and then in my head and stuff. And like nothing happened. And, the mom, she's like, well, I've learned to, take things one day at a time. And, I believe that God helps us through struggles and stuff. But it was like, she wasn't expecting at that point for any kind of a miracle, because every single person that comes along is like trying to heal this kid. And she sees time and time again, it's like, oh, you're just, doing what everyone else is doing. And here we go again. But yeah.
Jeez. It's really rough. And at the same time, though, we're kind of in the position right now of for a lot of people who may be watching this, pulling apart something that's so dear to them and so important to them that they believe that, God is there for them, that's going to heal them and things like that. So it's like we're put in the position of like we're being dicks to people in a way, but we're trying to call out the dicks, like we're trying to like point out like, hey, this doesn't work.
It's like when people say that a psychic, they're like, well, it makes people feel good. What's the harm? Like if someone wants to go to a psychic and it makes them feel good to connect with their dead loved ones, or at least think that they're connecting with their dead loved ones, what difference does it make? And it's like, well, on top of the fact that these people are separating you from your wallet and they have a financial agenda, on top of that, you have the fact that it's like something might feel good. It doesn't mean it's good for you. Someone could, in the case of the psychics, they might need to be able to move on and to accept the situation and to heal, rather than have this kind of like addiction breadcrumbed in front of them by someone who has the audacity to claim that they can speak for someone that they love that passed away. And with the faith healer, it's like, oh, they're going to this person and like they genuinely believe it, and it makes them feel better, and they're comforted by the prayers and all of this stuff. It's like, well, but if you're going to that and you think it makes you feel good, it might feel good. It doesn't mean it's good for you, in the same way that drugs might feel good, but it's not necessarily good for you. Are you sprinkling false hope in front of someone, kind of luring them along, draining them of their money, and then if they're not healed, making them feel guilty and awful and horrible? Even if you're not deliberately doing that, they're still coming away with that feeling, because that's the way that this plays out. And it's you're seeding them with false hope, and there's inevitable disappointment waiting.
It very much so. There's so much more I wanted to touch on, especially going into the miracles of Jesus and talking about Hume a little bit. No testimony sufficient to establish a miracle, etc., and how we can verify miracles. But we're running out of time, so I want to jump into the Q&A. If anyone has any questions, make sure to post them. Sorry.
I was gonna say while you're going through Q&A, there's one thing that I want to add to this that I think is important to touch on, and that these miracle accounts, they're not unique to Christianity by no
Oh,
means.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're
I was looking for miracles online, and most of them seem most of the faith healers seem to be Christian faith healers, right?
yeah. So there's a Muslim faith healer that's pretty well known named Mala Ali. It's Mala Ali Kurdistani. It's spelled like MALA space ALI space KURDISTANI. And he does the same, he pulls the same stunts where he'll like
Okay.
put his hands on someone's ears and be like, oh, you're gonna be able to hear now, you're gonna be able to hear now, or like you're gonna be able to speak now, or stand up and walk. And it's the same types of stunts that you see being pulled by someone like Jack Coe 60 years ago, or not 60 years ago, in the 50s. How long ago was that? Almost 70 years ago. And
That's crazy.
And so you're seeing all these same things. There was a guy in India who has millions of followers to this day. People genuinely believe that he had, miraculous powers. And
Satya Sai Baba?
Satya Sai Baba. And he would pull like these dust pellets out of the air and it'd be like, oh, here's this miraculous sign for you, or some healing for you, or some word of prophecy. And the dude prophesied his own death and he got the date wrong.
Yeah.
And how many
he also said he would come, also said he would come back. But he didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so people they'll turn to these gurus, they'll turn to, whether it's a witch doctor or a pastor or, some imam, and they think that there's some power in the divine. And in actuality, it's nothing but up here. It's our brains are incredibly powerful. There is a placebo effect that can happen in situations where there's a psychosomatic element to it. But when you're talking about organic conditions, when you're talking about things like organ failure or, cancers, or, the body being like twisted or broken in one way, shape, or form, complete total blindness, like retinal detachment, you're not going to see a faith healer be able to come along and change that. You just won't.
Captain Dadpool said, I once prayed over someone for healing, and they claimed they felt a warm sensation and the pain went away. Yeah, I've experienced that as well. I just want to mention too, this guy, Satya Sai Baba, he used to make like Rolexes and watches form in people's hands and gold and stuff. When he died, they checked out his place, and he had like hundreds of watches and gold jewelry just like chilling there with like barcodes and stuff. And the other thing too is people say, especially will point to Jesus and say that, they saw, there's testimony of Jesus, the empty tomb, him raising from the dead and stuff, and that's a whole other conversation. And they believe it. But Satya Sai Baba, you can interview the people that he raised from the dead. You can interview them, right? There's 4 people, like they're still alive today. Like this one person died twice. they're still there. Like, and 1 million people rocked up to his was it birthday or funeral or something? Like he had a large following of people.
And yet you can go and watch this footage, and it's the same stuff that like a magician, Penn and Teller, or someone might do, where they're kind of palming something, and then whoop, look behind your ear.
It's so cringy,
Look at this quarter I just like pulled out of nowhere.
So everyone, just before we jump into the Q&A, I wanted to say, make sure you go, everyone would have subscribed to your channel. You're one of the biggest skeptic channels on YouTube. Holy Kool-Aid. This episode here, The Miracles That Always Fail, go check it out. Get those views up, because you haven't been posting in a while. So you mentioned in one of your videos that the more people who watch, like, and follow and things like that, it helps the algorithm, because YouTube likes to punish people who don't stick to a daily schedule. But go subscribe to Holy Kool-Aid. Also, if you want to support his work, he's got a Patreon linked in the description. And also, for those who don't know, who've maybe never been to this podcast before, this is a podcast where I ask the guests to choose their drink of choice. We drink it over deep conversations. And next week we have Michael Granado, a PhD candidate, and we're going to be talking about the history of time. What is time? And we're going to be talking about time and getting a little bit woo with that, but more sciencey woo than woo. So that'll be a good one. So come along and enjoy. And thanks everyone for rocking up. So let's jump into some Q&A questions. So a question that I have for you now, this is last time you were on. I asked you, what if anything would change your mind. Right, that's the question I tend to ask all guests. I also asked you, what's your favorite afterlife, if you could choose an afterlife, and you said The Egg by that author. I read the book, by the way. Great little novel. Andy Weir, yeah. Now, this is another question that's come up. That's really great because you can ask both a theist and a non-theist. And this is a question I like to ask people. What is the most plausibly true religion that you don't believe in?
Oh, that's a good question. The most plausibly true. I tend to be more drawn to Buddhism because it's more of a philosophy than it is necessarily a religion, but there's so many different shades of Buddhism. So I was talking to one of my friends from Thailand about it, and she was talking about all the different nuances of how within Christianity and Islam we have so many different denominations and stuff. And you have some people that are Buddhist who genuinely believe in, the Book of the Dead and the supernatural and all this afterlife stuff. And then other people can literally be Buddhist atheists who just they love the balance. They love like the middle way and the philosophy of it. So like there's aspects within Buddhism that I find appealing, but then there's other sides of it that I don't. I don't know. It's as far as most likely to be true. Nothing with deities, unless the deity is like some sort of highly technologically advanced civilization.
So Scientology.
I knew you were going to go there. The second I said that, I was like, oh, we're not going to plug Scientology.
Yeah.
If it wasn't so controlling and culty, and then minus the whole like however many billions of years ago a volcano exploding with all the thetans and the souls going out and the bad spirits and getting clear and all of that, like, sure. Yeah, I'm trying to think what other religions, because I mean, like, Christianity is basically Judaism with extra bullshit. Islam is Christianity with extra bullshit. And Mormonism is all of it with extra bullshit.
There's Hinduism, there's Buddhism, there's Sikhism, Jainism,
Taoism. I don't know enough about Taoism.
Yeah.
It's just like the forces of like light and darkness, good and bad, like in a constant, struggle. Sure. There's like Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, Norse mythology. Possibly some kind of pantheism where it's like if I had to choose a religion and it's like, okay, there's no like specific dogma, there's no specific book, there's no specific interactive deity, but it's kind of like the universe was all somehow interconnected. I don't see people love to go into quantum stuff and like, oh, quantum entanglement, therefore all the universe, you're connected with this and that. It's like, okay, but how does it affect me aside from the measurable forces that we know exist? Is it conscious? Is it thinking it through? Is it like, oh, hey, I am the universe and the energy, and so I'm going to somehow consciously decide that this karma thing is going to happen because I'm like keeping track and keeping score? That's too close to me to a omniscient deity. But if it's that, hey, we're somehow connected with this world and there's like a butterfly effect to our actions, and that there's karma exists not in the sense of it's this conscious thing that the universe is telling, but more in the sense that if I'm a dick to other people, they're not going to want to hang out with me and spend time with me, and so my actions have consequences, then sure.
Okay, so what one?
I guess a very watered down version of pantheism.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So just pantheism, like in general, like not
I
like
guess.
a specific pantheism.
If I have to choose, deism perhaps.
Deism,
highly
yeah,
advanced
okay.
alien civilization created it, and then they went off to some other dimension. That's my religion of choice.
Interesting. I think a lot of people choose Buddhism, and I've been thinking about it. And I think I might change my answer to the Advaita Vedanta, which is the idea like everything is consciousness, and like what like consciousness first, material the realm isn't actually material. That's probably where I maybe lean, or maybe
Like a brain in the
Bar-
vat type, or
yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah,
Matrix or some.
or like I think it's the Baha faith, but I really like the concept. I don't know if it's in Buddhism or something, but it's like where the story comes from. But it's like the Buddhism of the blind man and the elephant, where it's like everyone's touching this thing and they're describing different parts of the elephant, and they're saying, "Oh, it's got a big nose, and it's got a trunk. Sorry, it's got legs," and they're all describing it differently. So if there's a faith that's kind of like that, that's like, people are tapping into something. These emotional experiences, maybe,
Yeah.
but there's like, I don't know. And we
Wouldn't
just
that
can't
kind of be like a sort of a branch of pantheism, where it's kind of it's all interconnected,
Yeah,
and divine?
I guess so. Yeah.
Are you familiar with have you
Are
ever
we
read
deconverting together?
converting?
Yeah.
Have you ever read God's Debris by the guy
No.
who wrote Dilbert? The concept is basically that the universe, that the Big Bang and all of that, was God had a question, and his question was, what would happen if I kill myself? And
What's it called? God's what?
God's Debris. So
God's Debris,
basically,
okay.
God explodes in a whole let there be light Big Bang type scenario, and the universe is basically, the universe is slowly God putting himself back together again.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's a cool concept.
And then there's that. I think if I had to choose a religion, it would either be something like that, or Isaac Asimov's The Final Question, or The Last Question, where it's basically the universe becomes more and more and more and more advanced until everything is part of like this collective internet consciousness, but it's not just at like a planetary level, it's at like a cosmic level. And the universe, as we reach a complete state of entropy and the last star is burning out, then that consciousness is so highly advanced that it kickstarts a new universe and says, let there be light.
Interesting.
Hence,
you always leave me with interesting books to read.
Yeah. And so it's basically the question, the last question to be answered is, can entropy reverse itself? And even though we continue to gather more and more and more information with more and more advanced supercomputers, this computer continues to answer, there's insufficient data for a reasonable answer. And finally, at the very end, once it's collected every single form of consciousness and person merging with this computer, and it's so highly advanced, then it basically answers the question with the phrase, let there be light, and kickstarts a new universe. But in that type of a scenario, it would be not a supernatural deity, but a natural, highly technologically advanced entity that would be God. And so to me, it's like, if there is some kind of religion, either we are the first one of those, and that if that's even possible, if it's even something that could remotely exist, then we're either the result of that kind of a deity, or we are the first one, and the Big Bang happened naturally, and we're forming into it. So if I had to be religious, it'd probably be something like that.
Interesting. That was a great answer to a question. That's probably the best answer we've had on that question, actually. Very, very deep. I love it. Because we're at time now, I'll just ask one last question, and that is, and I think this is important to get your input on, is, let's say someone is watching this and they want to investigate miracles like that maybe experienced in their own life. When I say miracles, we know what I'm talking about, right? They want to investigate things that they attribute as miracles in their own life, and they want to determine whether or not they're true or false. What advice would you give to this person?
I mean, if it's a miracle that's done by a major faith healer, literally just Google search for any kind of independent, like don't go to the person's website where they have like testimonies, because a lot of times that's curated. The person, in the case of Alpha Cow, he literally got caught paying off people multiple
Mm.
people to come and say that they were cured of AIDS, and they never were. And
Mm.
he forged documents. He did all, and like he got caught in the act doing this stuff. And
Yeah.
if you watch the beginning of this episode, and you're just now, or if you're just now coming in at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about all of the different faith healers
Yeah.
that just the ones at the top, they get busted time and time and time and time again for dishonest tactics and sometimes outright fraud. And
Mm.
so I'd say, like, if it's a big name faith healer, don't go to their own website. Look for some independent source. Oftentimes it's even other religious people who are calling them out, like the Trinity Foundation. They have a lot of information there on their website. There's a Christian guy named Justin Peters who also does exposés on religious people and groups like Bethel and stuff like that. And so you can go and actually kind of learn a little bit more behind the scenes and kind of get familiar with some of the trickery. Watch my series, watch my videos on it, but also don't just take people's word at it. You know, if someone realize that people have incentives and agendas and things like that, and people also misremember, and people also tend to exaggerate, and stories change from one person to the next, dig deeper, ask more questions, track down the original person, ask to see it, and know that like videos can be doctored, videos can be fake, actors can be hired. If there are plausible explanations for it, then the being a skeptic isn't just about being like completely contrarian and not open to evidence. It's saying that the evidence has to be proportionate to the claim that's being made. So it's not just saying no, but it's also not being so open-minded that you just accept anything. It's saying, hey, is there a better explanation, a more plausible explanation? Let's dig deeper and let's actually test if this stuff is true. And if you look throughout history, for, you know, going back even before the James Randi Educational Foundation, there were churches that offered large prizes to people like Jack Coe that came forward and said, hey, we'll give you $2,500, which in today's dollars is like $25,000, if you can actually show and prove under medical verification or under medical observation that a miracle is real. And he turned them down and never came forward and actually proved it, and then wound up going to the hospital himself and dying of polio. So it's things like that it's like, if enough of these situations you see time and time and time again where there is trickery and fraud and all of this stuff, and then even when people are sincere, we fool ourselves and we put ourselves in situations where our brains can become susceptible to deception, and where we're in chemically altered states, like not from a substance necessarily, although it could be, but just your natural neurochemicals that are released. You're putting yourself into sober induced trances. You're putting yourself in a position where you are highly susceptible. And it's like, research a little bit more, explore how this stuff works, look for the mechanisms behind it, and don't just take someone's word for it, especially if they stand to profit and stand to gain from you believing in it.
That's great. I guess great advice. Great advice also for people who are looking into natural healing. You know, turmeric root extract or whatever. Rub garlic on your ankles 4 times a day with my special. Anyway, thank you so much, Thomas, for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been really great getting to know you more and kindling a bit of a friendship as we talk about these pieces of shit, as I may say. If you could sign us off with your catchphrase, that'd be absolutely great.
Well, David, thank you so much for having me on. And everyone, as I always say, dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Cheers.